They say the eyes are the windows to the soul, but that's only the beginning. In moments of stillness, when the world is quiet enough, you might begin to notice something strange. The light hits your reflection in a certain way, and suddenly it feels like your own gaze is looking back from somewhere deeper. You blink, it passes, but something lingers. Not fear, not confusion, a whisper, a pull, as if your eyes have become more than organs of sight, as if they are remembering what they were always meant to do. This is not a metaphor. It is not poetic. This is real. For thousands of years, ancient cultures knew it. They spoke of the eye of Horus, the third eye, the sacred gaze. They knew the eyes were not just how we see the world, but how we enter it, how we move through it, how we change it. And now, something is happening again. More and more people are waking up, and they're seeing things they cannot explain. Not just lights, not just colors, but truths, patterns, energy, and it's starting with their eyes. If you've ever felt like your sight is shifting, like your gaze carries something it didn't before, this message is for you. Because the moment your vision begins to change, you're no longer just watching the world. You're beginning to remember why you came here at all. Let's begin. It started quietly, not with thunder, not with visions, but with a question I couldn't quite shake. One morning, I looked at my own reflection, and something about it felt different. Not strange, not mystical, just quietly unfamiliar, like meeting an old friend you forgot you once loved. I stared at myself longer than usual, not out of vanity, but out of a sense that something was waiting just behind the eyes, looking back. That day, I began noticing other things. The way certain people's eyes carried storms, while others felt like open skies. The way some glances pierced through me, as if they saw more than what I chose to show. And then one night, a dream came. I was walking through an ancient temple. There were no words, just symbols and silence. At the center of the temple, a single stone eye was carved into the floor, and when I looked into it, it blinked. I woke up gasping, and for a moment, I wasn't sure which world I was still in. From there, everything began to change, slowly, at first, but real. Light felt different on my skin. People's emotions moved through me before they even spoke. I wasn't seeing with my eyes anymore. It was something else, something older. That's when I started reading. Not just books, but symbols, scrolls, carvings. I found that this wasn't new. The Egyptians had a name for it, Udjat, the Eye of Horus. Not just a symbol of protection, but of perception beyond the veil. In India, they called it the Ajna, the third eye, the center of insight and spiritual sight. Tibetan monks believed the eyes could carry transmission, not just of thought, but of spirit. The more I explored, the more I realized I wasn't losing my mind. I was regaining something I had lost, a different kind of vision, one that didn't need proof, just presence. There was a moment, I remember it clearly, when I sat under the trees, and a child passed by and looked up at me. Her eyes held nothing but curiosity, but in that moment, I felt seen in a way that broke me and healed me. All at once, I cried, not because I was sad, but because I knew, deep down, that something old had returned. The eye doesn't just observe the world, it remembers it, and sometimes, when we are ready, it begins to remember itself. That's what this journey is about. Not religion, not belief, but a return to the sacred gaze we've forgotten we always had. And maybe, just maybe, your eyes are already waking up too. It didn't happen all at once. There was no voice from the sky, no grand awakening moment, just a quiet shift I didn't know how to name. It began when I was sitting in a cafe one afternoon, watching people move in and out, sipping coffee, staring at phones, just living. And suddenly, I wasn't looking at them the same way. I couldn't explain it at the time, but it felt like I was seeing through things, like there was a pulse behind every movement, a rhythm behind every smile, an energy behind every word. It made me pause, not because I was scared, but because I felt alert, awake, in a way I hadn't before. Colors looked deeper. Rooms felt different. I would enter a space and feel a sudden heaviness or a strange calm that wasn't mine, but somehow moved through me, as if I had walked into a story that my body could read before my mind could understand. One evening, I was with a friend. She hadn't said anything yet, but before a single word left her mouth, I already knew she was hurting. I could feel it, not because she looked different, but because something in her field spoke to mine. That's when I started blinking more often, like I was trying to recalibrate how I processed what I was seeing. At first, I thought I was just tired, or maybe something was wrong with my eyes, maybe too much screen time, I told myself. But deep down, I knew it was something else. My sight was beginning to stretch. I started noticing soft glows around people, like faint light outlines that disappeared if I stared too directly. Sometimes I saw quick flashes at the edge of my vision, just enough to wonder, but not enough to prove. And light changed. Natural light began to feel sacred. Artificial light felt jarring. It was like my eyes were learning a new language, a language of frequency, not form. Looking at someone became more than seeing them. It became feeling them, hearing the part of them they weren't saying. Some people told me my gaze felt different, softer, more intense, healing. Even I didn't know what to say. I wasn't trying to be anything. I was just seeing, but not like I used to. Not with labels, or roles, or surface. Something in me had opened, or maybe something in me had come back. And once I crossed that invisible threshold, there was no going back. The way I saw the world had changed, and I had changed with it. I no longer trusted appearances. I trusted energy. I trusted how something made me feel before I tried to explain it. The old version of me, the one who needed certainty, who only believed what could be measured, started to fade, not all at once, but gradually, like a shell falling away, to reveal a softer truth underneath. Now, when I meet someone, I don't just look at their face. I meet their frequency. I listen to the space around them. It's not always easy. It's not always comfortable, but it's real. And that's what I choose now, to see what's real, not just what's visible. Because the moment you begin to see energy, the illusion of separation starts to fall apart. And in that unraveling, something deeper begins, something whole, something true, something like sight. But finally, with soul, it started with small things, little moments that didn't seem important until they began to repeat. I would be walking down the street, thinking of a question, and then suddenly, a billboard would catch my eye with a word that felt like an answer. I would be lost in thought, then glance at a passing license plate and see a number I had been dreaming about for days. At first, I shrugged it off. Coincidence, I told myself. Just randomness lining up. But something in me wasn't convinced. It kept happening, and the timing was too precise, too personal, like the universe was speaking. But only when I was truly paying attention. That's when I began to wonder if my gaze itself was part of the pattern. Not just my thoughts, not just my intentions, but the simple act of seeing. Was it possible that my eyes were no longer passive observers, but active participants in how reality unfolded around me? The question stayed with me. I began noticing that certain things only appeared when I was in a particular state of mind, calm, centered, present. In those moments, my gaze felt different, as if it had weight, as if it carried a silent invitation to the world to reflect something back. And it did. Books would open to the right page. People would say words I had just whispered in my heart. A feather would fall, right as I asked for a sign. One night, I was sitting by my window, thinking of someone I had not seen in years, Just as I exhaled their name in silence, a message lit up on my phone. It was them. No words, just a photo of the place where we had once stood together. My breath caught, not from fear, but from the recognition that something unseen was dancing just beneath the surface of everything. I started reading about it. Some called it quantum entanglement. Some called it divine timing. Others spoke of attention as a bridge between mind and matter. But I didn't need a theory. I had already lived it. I understood that my gaze was no longer just mine. It was connected like a thread, woven into something larger, something alive, something aware. And with that realization came a shift in how I looked at the world. I stopped rushing. I paused more often, not to analyze, but to witness, because now I knew what I looked at was also looking back, not in a spooky way, in a sacred way. My presence, my stillness, my eyes had become a kind of mirror, and the universe had been waiting for me to notice. The lesson, if there is one, is that life is always listening, but it listens differently when we become present enough to see it respond. So if you felt like certain symbols, certain signs, certain moments find you exactly when you need them, maybe it's not the world chasing you. Maybe it's your gaze, pulling them in. And once you realize this, the question is no longer why things happen. The question becomes, how much of what you see are you truly ready to receive? Because when your sight shifts from passive to conscious, synchronicity becomes a language, and your life becomes a conversation. Now, as we move deeper, I want to share with you what happens when the world doesn't just reflect back, but when your reflection itself begins to change. Because the next shift is not just about seeing signs around you. It's about what happens when your own image in the mirror starts carrying a truth you never expected to meet. Let's explore that together. There was a time I used to avoid mirrors, not out of insecurity, not because I didn't like what I saw, but because something in the reflection felt incomplete, as if I was looking at a version of myself that hadn't quite arrived yet. I remember one morning in particular. I had just woken up. The sun was slipping through the curtain in soft gold. I walked past the mirror, half asleep, but something made me stop. It wasn't the way I looked. It was the way I felt. The reflection felt like it was watching me, not in a strange way, but in a way that made me feel completely seen. For a long moment, I didn't move. I didn't blink. There was a stillness in the air, and a depth in my own eyes that felt unfamiliar and ancient. And then something happened. I smiled, but the smile wasn't for the mirror. It was for the part of me that had been waiting to surface. That was the first time I truly understood what people meant when they said, you could meet your soul through your own gaze. After that day, I began noticing more. My reflection wasn't always the same. Some days it felt clear, strong, grounded. Other days it felt distant, like a layer of fog between me and myself. I started to realize that mirrors were not just glass. They were gateways. They reflected not just appearance, but energy, mood, state of being. When I was scattered, my reflection looked blurred. When I was centered, it felt luminous, like my eyes carried a quiet fire I couldn't name. And it wasn't just me who noticed. A close friend once told me, your eyes have changed. They're softer now, but there's something powerful behind them, like you're listening, even when you're silent. That stayed with me, because what I was experiencing was not just visual. It was a reflection of my own shift. As I became more honest with myself, the mirror responded. As I let go of the stories, the masks, the shoulds, what remained was something real, something tender and whole. This is what I've come to understand. Reflections change because we change, and during spiritual awakening, that change moves from the inside out. The mirror doesn't lie, but it does reveal especially when we're ready to see more than just a face. It shows us presence. It shows us absence. It shows us where the light is beginning to rise and where the shadow is still learning to soften. And when you start to feel like your reflection is not just following you, but inviting you, that is when the real shift begins. Because the awakening is not just about what you see in the world, it's about seeing who is watching from within, the version of you that has waited through all the noise to be remembered. The lesson for me was simple, but not easy. The mirror is not the test, it is the teacher. And when we stop trying to fix the reflection and start listening to it, something inside us settles. The war with the surface ends, and the conversation with the soul begins from that place. The eyes do more than reflect light, they hold it and they share it. And that leads us into what happens when your light becomes something others begin to feel without a word spoken. Let's step into that next. There was a day when someone looked at me and said, "You don't even have to speak. Your eyes already say everything." And I didn't know how to answer because I hadn't meant to say anything at all. But something had changed, and I had felt it long before anyone else noticed. It began as a gentle hum, like warmth behind the eyes, like a soft glow that didn't come from the outside. There was no dramatic moment, no sudden flash of light or voice from the sky, just a growing awareness that my gaze was starting to carry something more than just sight. People reacted to me differently. Some would pause in the middle of a sentence, their voice softening, their eyes lingering just a little longer. Others would suddenly open up, share something deeply personal, as if they had been waiting for someone who could simply hold space without judgment. It was beautiful, but also confusing. I wasn't trying to do anything. I wasn't offering advice or asking questions. I was just present. Over time, I began to understand there was a kind of light, a frequency that had begun to flow through my eyes, not because I earned it, but because I had softened enough to let it through. You see, when the heart begins to awaken, the eyes follow. They stop chasing attention and begin offering presence. They stop judging and begin reflecting peace. And people feel it, often without knowing why. One moment that stays with me was during a walk in the park. An elderly man was sitting alone on a bench. Our eyes met briefly, and I smiled. He smiled back and nodded, like we had shared something, wordless, but real. I didn't think much of it until I passed by again, an hour later, and he stopped me. "I don't know what it is," he said, "but when you looked at me earlier, I felt less alone." I thanked him, but inside, I was the one who felt moved, because in that moment, I realized the light we carry is never just for us. It touches others in ways we may never fully understand. Not every reaction is soft, though. Some people pull away. They avoid eye contact. They become uncomfortable, defensive, and I've learned that's okay too. Light doesn't always feel kind when it touches what someone isn't ready to see. But that doesn't mean it's wrong. It means it's honest. What matters is that the light you carry comes without force, without pride, without expectation, just as it is, quiet, still, true. The lesson I've come to hold close is this: when your eyes begin to carry light, you become a mirror, not of the world, but of the soul. And some will see beauty, some will see pain, some will see themselves, but all of them will feel you. That is the beginning of a new kind of communication, one that does not require words, one that speaks in presence, in truth, in silence. And in that silence, another transformation begins, because the more light your eyes carry, the more clearly you begin to see not just others, but illusion itself. And once that veil begins to lift, you cannot unsee what has always been hiding in plain sight. Let's explore that in the next part. It began quietly, as most real things do, a moment here, a feeling there, The sense that something in a conversation didn't match the words being spoken, that a smile felt slightly too rehearsed, that the energy in a room said more than the people in it. At first, I thought I was being too sensitive or overthinking things, as I often had in the past. But then it kept happening, over and over, little cracks in the surface that I could no longer unsee. One day, I was speaking with someone I had known for years. They were telling a story, something cheerful, something light, but their eyes were somewhere else. Their voice carried the words, but their gaze carried the truth, and I felt it like a quiet ache beneath the surface of their story. That was the moment I knew my eyes had changed, not in color or shape, but in function. I was no longer just looking at people. I was seeing through them, not in a way that invaded, but in a way that revealed. And with that gift came a responsibility I hadn't expected, because once you begin to see through illusion, you start to notice how much of life is built on it. The false roles, the half-truths, the stories we tell ourselves just to stay safe or stay the same. I started feeling it everywhere. In workplaces that celebrated performance but ignored the quiet exhaustion behind it. In friendships that functioned on habit but no longer held truth. In my own thoughts, the old beliefs that no longer matched the person I was becoming. It was humbling and it was heavy, because clarity, as beautiful as it is, also burns. It burns through the excuses, through the masks, through the layers we've built to survive. And yet, once I started seeing with that kind of clarity, I couldn't go back. I couldn't pretend not to notice, not out of judgment, but out of honesty. The world had not changed. I had, and I realized that's what awakening often feels like. Not like bliss, but like truth. And sometimes, truth strips things away before it brings anything new. There were moments I felt lonely, like I no longer belonged in the same conversations or the same environments. But there was also relief, a quiet kind of peace that comes when you no longer have to lie to yourself just to feel accepted. One quiet morning, I stood in front of a mirror, and I didn't try to adjust anything. I just looked and breathed and let everything be. The reflection didn't feel perfect, but it felt real, and that was enough. So here's what I've learned. In those moments of deep seeing, clarity is not cruelty. It is compassion. Without illusion, it is love that doesn't need to be soft, to be true, and it is the path to living a life that no longer needs to be edited. For the sake of comfort, the more you live from that space, the more your eyes become sacred tools, not just for seeing others, but for seeing yourself with tenderness and with truth. And once you see yourself that way, you begin to see the world differently too. You see what matters. You see what's real. You see what stays. And as that vision sharpens, something unexpected begins to rise. A new kind of language, a new kind of presence, where the eyes stop being tools of observation and begin to speak without words, without sound. Let's walk into that space together in the next part. It's a strange thing when silence begins to speak louder than words. You don't expect it, and at first, you don't trust it. But then it happens again and again until you realize something inside you has started to communicate without a voice. It began with a glance, a long, steady gaze during a conversation where neither of us needed to explain. She looked at me, and I looked back, and in that moment, we both knew what needed to be said without saying anything at all. It wasn't mind reading. It wasn't mystical. It was presence, that rare, undiluted, undistracted presence, the kind that feels like I see you, and I'm not afraid of what I see. After that, I started noticing more. I would walk into a room, and before anyone spoke, I could feel the temperature of the space, not the air, but the energy. I could tell who needed comfort, who wanted space, who was holding something they couldn't yet name. Sometimes people would start opening up to me without knowing why. They'd say, "I don't usually talk about this," or "I'm not sure why I'm telling you this." But I knew why. It wasn't me. It was the space between us, the silence that didn't demand anything, but made room for everything. I began to understand that our eyes are not just receivers, they are transmitters. When we hold someone's gaze with honesty, with softness, with no agenda, we're offering more than eye contact. We're offering recognition, and sometimes recognition is all someone needs to feel less alone. One moment I'll never forget was with a little boy on a train. He couldn't have been older than 5. He sat across from me, staring, not awkward, just curious. I smiled. He didn't smile back. He just kept looking, and I felt it, that quiet, ancient feeling of being seen, not as an adult, not as a stranger, but as something familiar. Eventually, he turned back to his mother, but I carried that moment with me for days. It reminded me that communication is not always taught. Sometimes it's remembered. There is a reason animals respond to us without words. Why a dog knows who to trust. Why a child feels safe with certain people before they speak a single sentence. It's not about logic. It's about frequency. And your eyes, especially during awakening, begin to carry that frequency, a quiet vibration that says, "You're safe here. You're seen here." But just like light, this energy can also reveal sometimes your gaze will stir discomfort, especially in those who are not ready to face their own reflection. And that's okay. Not everyone is meant to walk with you, but those who are will feel the invitation in your silence. The language of presence, of truth, of peace speaks louder than any perfectly chosen word ever could. And your eyes are learning that language, not as a technique, but as a truth. The lesson here is simple. Speak when needed, but let your presence speak first. And when you meet someone who speaks that same silent language, you'll know, because it won't be a meeting of words, but a meeting of recognition. And when that happens, you are no longer walking alone. You are part of a web of quiet souls scattered across the world, carrying light through the eyes and connection through the silence. And that leads us into one final turning point. Because once you've spoken through silence, once you've seen through illusion, once you've held light without trying, you begin to ask yourself a different kind of question. How do I live in a world that still moves so fast, so loud, so asleep? When my eyes are finally awake, let's find that answer together. In the final part, there's a moment after the awakening, after the seeing, after the shedding, when you're no longer looking for signs, but learning how to be the sign. And that's when the real journey begins, not the mystical one, not the breathtaking one, but the quiet, daily, human one, where the question shifts from, "What is happening to me?" to, "How do I live with what I now know?" Because living with awakened eyes isn't always easy. You see things others miss. You feel things others silence. You carry light in a world still addicted to shadows. And some days, you'll want to dim it down just to feel a little more normal again. I've been there. There were days I longed for the simplicity of not seeing so much, not feeling so deeply. But the truth is, you can't go back, and you're not meant to. The eyes that have opened cannot unsee, but they can learn how to see with grace, not with overwhelm, not with judgment, but with clarity and compassion. So how do you live when your gaze has become a mirror and a light and a language all at once? You begin with stillness, moments of returning to your breath, to your body, to the ground beneath your feet, because awakened sight needs anchoring, not to keep it from flying, but to give it somewhere to land. You start noticing the small things. Again, the way sunlight touches leaves, the way someone's eyes brighten when they feel truly heard, the way truth, even whispered, can ripple through a room. You begin to walk slower, not out of hesitation, but out of reverence, because, you know, you're not just walking through space, you're moving through meaning. You begin to speak less, but say more. And when you look at someone, you don't just see who they pretend to be, you see the ache, the brilliance, the longing they forgot how to name, and you hold that gently, without fixing, without saving, just honoring. You also learn to protect your gaze, not by closing your eyes, but by choosing where you place them. What you watch, what you follow, what you consume, all of it shapes the frequency you hold. So, you learn to look with care. You learn that presence is not just a gift, it's a responsibility. And perhaps the most sacred thing you learn is this: you are not here to escape the world. You are here to walk through it with different eyes, eyes that bring light into heavy places, eyes that remind others of the truth they carry too. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to prove it. Just live it. Let your gaze be soft. Let your presence be quiet. Let your vision be sacred. Because if your eyes have awakened, then so has your path. And the more gently you walk it, the more clearly others will feel the invitation to awaken too. Not because you told them to, but because you lived it fully, honestly, beautifully. This is not the end. This is where it truly begins. So take a breath and open your eyes, not just to see, but to be seen. The world is ready, and so are you. If something in you stirred while listening, if your eyes have been feeling different lately, if your presence is shifting in ways you can't quite explain, you're not alone. You're not imagining it, you're remembering it. There's a reason you've always felt things others missed. There's a reason silence sometimes speaks louder to you than words. There's a reason your gaze has begun to hold a weight, a warmth, a light that even strangers can feel. It's because you've begun to return to yourself and this journey of seeing the world through awakened eyes. It isn't about being special or different or enlightened. It's about being honest and human and fully here. So take your time. Breathe through the changes. Protect the softness that's growing within you. Because in a world that's rushing to be seen, your stillness, your depth, your gaze is a sanctuary. If this spoke to something inside you, if it named what you felt but never found the words for, let this space be a place you return to. And if you feel ready, share this with someone who might be waking up too, but still walking in the dark. And if you haven't yet, you're invited to subscribe, not just to a channel, but to a deeper way of living, of seeing, of being, because your eyes are no longer ordinary. They are the light your soul has been waiting to shine through. And now they have begun. We'll walk this path together. Until next time, stay open, stay grounded, and keep seeing with your whole being